We're live.
Oh, wow, Django.
Live
It's almost one of those things that you love.
East of West, Volume 8. What a book.
What a book. I mean, I'm sure we're going to see somebody else trickle in here in a second. I know Andrew is.
Andrew's trying to find a way in. He's wondering if it got canceled again and no one told him.
Django, are you keeping Andrew on the other side of this whole book club? Is that what this is?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm bad at what I do.
No, I don't think that's
I'll send him a
Hey,
I'll send him a thing here.
Nathan.
I've been gaslighting Andrew, so don't worry.
Oh god. Oh no, it's happening. Nathan, is this a new angle? We've been in this room before, but I feel like you were closer to the bookshelf before. New angle. I love that. I love the variety
start finding
of
new
your Zoom
angles
calls.
in my room.
I'm in a new room every time.
I kind of believe that.
It's my blood house.
I hear Django's hollow blood room echo all the time.
Everywhere.
The blood house.
This is the weirdest book club conversation I've ever heard. What are they doing in there? There's Andrew.
All right. We got a party now.
We've got a party.
Hey, it was good to see everybody. We'll see you next
the
week.
party cleric, though.
I was just gonna say the cleric. That's so fucking well done, Win. I don't know why cleric was the
I usually play as a clerik when I play. So
I never have. It was just a spiritual connection. Welcome everyone to the book club. This room is very
inflatable thing.
Very hot room.
It is very, very hot.
It's just hot in general.
I hope everyone is able to sleep in this horribly hot weather. Or, if you're not able to, that it's for other reasons that are
whiskey helps.
From Eastern Washington. You've been here long enough to think that this is hot weather.
Dude, this house with no AC and it just gets direct sunlight all day. The sun just like goes over my house and there's no real windows. And the ones that I do get to have open, my cats yesterday broke the screen. Super cool. Love it. So yeah, it's a self-induced heat prism.
Yeah. Washington is further south than Scotland is, so it's really hot.
Whoa.
Yo.
Dang.
Yeah.
Scotland's pretty low latitude.
Hey, can I give you a little geographical icebreaker to kick us off that has nothing to do with East of West? Ready for this? Detroit, Michigan is east of Atlanta.
Detroit is
this isn't a joke. It's just
Atlanta.
that's the thing, which is crazy.
I don't know what the maps look like, but I'll give you a geographic icebreaker to segue into East of West. East of West is sort of like Northwest, which is where we are.
Yeah.
You are so good at this.
I was going to
say a couple podcasts.
East has a 16-point-something% higher likelihood of killing you.
Oh, what a moment. Everyone, we got to hang out with our little buddies today.
I have to say,
or whenever you read this.
They were so close to saying the title in here. I was upset that they didn't, because it was like so close to actually saying East of West.
Especially because like pages before, someone finally says you've earned what's coming for you.
I wanted to talk to everyone about that. You don't think that does anyone remember when that was like one of the first handful of issues that was like the white script on, right?
Yeah.
And it's been on the back of all of the trades.
Yeah. Oh, has
ever
it been?
since then.
Yeah, it's the back on
everything.
And if you have the Embrace Nihilism shirt, it says on the back of that too.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was like, this is a strong, hook. I know that this one exists, but it got me thinking, like, how many of these, because we've seen other ones crop up. Yeah.
I think you were thinking the same thing that I was exactly going to ask you the same question is, do you think that he knew that that was going to be said at some point way towards the end? He planted that so early on in the book, or did he say it early on in the book thinking it was a cool thing to say and then found a spot for it later on?
I thought it would be awesome if just a Hickman writing tool that he had was to develop like 6 or 7 quotes that he knew thematically fit with his, series, and just found different ways to get to those quotes through a story.
Say that it's a very Hickman thing to have those quotes kind of just floating independently of any characters or plot. So, I could see him kind of generating a word cloud of, phrases that embody the feeling and the tone and the kind of author's intent. And if they slip in and end up being said by a character, that's
even better.
All the better, yeah.
Yeah, I think he probably has a pretty high aptitude in a bunch of things that we would have or should have learned in like high school or college writing classes. That, like you said, the word balloon. Hickman, with everything, the way that everything has been tying together, and that we're seriously starting to see more and more with those quotes, man, I don't know. I think we're reaping the benefits of him just being fundamentally sound in a lot of sequential writing, which I think is pretty rad.
I keep getting nervous that he's going to write a novel or a television show instead.
You'll read it.
I would read it and I would watch it, but I love where he's at. And he also just seems, left of comics enough that he's just sort of waiting to do a different thing. And I hope that that's not the case.
Dear Lars von Trier, politely decline.
Hey, when was this the first volume that you had never read before?
Yep. So
nice. Okay.
Going in, had no idea what was going to happen.
And it was so Wolf forward, so that's very, very cool. Because I know you're a fan. We're all fans. So what do we think of this one in the sort of nearing the twilight of this whole thing? I guess.
Want to start it off with your assessment, and then we can go from there?
I don't know that I'm particularly good at the just singular volume assessments. I came up with a volume 1 pitch, but
no, I mean, just what did you think of it as I just read 5 issues of comics?
I dug it a lot, and this one felt like it went pretty quick for me. It was also the first one where I got lost in the middle of it, and I thought that I had divided things up by issues, and I realized that like the issue with Wolf, I think that there's maybe like 2 white page breaks or something, and I thought I was done, and I was not done with an issue, so I went back and I had to like recount and plot everything out. I thought it was interesting what we're doing with U.S. Marshal Guy, and I also felt it was a little like American cop taking down other people, which felt a little bit weird for this time right now, but I've also been kind of always resentful of like authority or law figures. And when that character was introduced early on in this series, I did kind of have the thought of like, I hope that this character of this sort of like U.S. embodiment of sort of martial law, or I don't know, a police type, wasn't going to be the hero. And I don't necessarily know that it is, but that was one thought I had while reading this particular volume.
Maybe he's penduluming. That's a gerund for creating. Back to something that we're not going to like for a different reason. Like he was the down and out for a little bit, and he had to like be our little underdog for a while. And maybe he's just going to rise and continue straight through, and we'll hate him again.
Well, and I did like him a lot in this, and
I
still had so much pain of the dog.
Felt kind of weird, right? Like it was like, now I'm like rooting for this dude who really is just out like playing more the stereotype, whereas most of the cultural identities in this book are made to be at least somewhat of an opposite of our 2020.
Yeah. And I was really eager to hear everyone's thoughts on just the middle portions of this. I think that I missed some subtext in the conversation between Wolf and the name with the letters B-O-D in it.
Bodaway.
Yeah, Bodaway. I was very interested to hear what sort of subtext people got out of that, particularly with the idea of bones and what is it?
Bones and bonded.
Yeah, bonds and bones or something. I read that whole thing 2 times about an hour apart from one another, and wasn't exactly sure what they were saying about what an older shaman or maybe Chiveo had done to put these bones in these bodies beneath the Union, and then the ship that went and extracted it. I had a hard time super tracking that, and I was really excited to hear what other people's brains did with that.
For me, to start, just kind of like Bones and Bonded, it seemed like some kind of spell was cast to prevent the because the Union seems like the most U.S. like typical like Washington D.C. political maneuverings, and so I took it as like the most like, because of what America has done to the Indians, to the Native Americans, that constant battle, that they wanted the Union to thrive, to have that enemy, so that they wouldn't be turning inwards and destroy themselves. That's just how I took it. I don't know what else I can add.
I'm with you with that part. I just want, I mean, I couldn't exactly the causality of the bones and how they got there, and if that was like releasing the spell that had been done to ultimately.
Yeah, that was essentially it. That at some point previously, a shaman had traveled to the Union capital, so DC essentially, and set down a ward using the bones of his people, and that's what's being extracted, is basically a Native American burial ground buried underneath the White Tower. That was part of a ritual to keep any Native Americans from setting foot in the capital, so that they wouldn't be able to directly stop the Union as they grew in power.
So he broke the magic.
Yeah.
The statement of a pureblood, First Nation person wouldn't be able to step in there, and it sounded, and then the next sentence was, and that sounds like a victory, and I couldn't understand, like, well, not being able to go there doesn't sound like a victory. But you explaining that totally makes sense now. So it was like they couldn't go there to break it down because they needed to have a strong competitive. Okay.
Well, the loophole is they sent a machine in to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, the interesting thing I think conceptually there is, the ideas of that people will destroy themselves through internal division if there is not an external enemy, and quote in this annoys me, in an foolish effort to recreate the old paradigm of external conflict, the most powerful shaman of their generation came to the Union to do big magic.
This is a reprint, Hickman. Fix your typo.
I'm glad that you and I have the same triggers, though. I was like, no. That's
I think it's pretty rad that while we're getting this deep, like when I read Endless Nation stuff, and this is like this for some comics, maybe sometimes when I read like a super complex Quitely page or a super complex Andrea Sorrentino page, I don't necessarily, as myself personally, I don't look into it for every piece that I'm supposed to extract from it. I kind of zoom out to 30,000 and I just get the vibe of what's going on, like chaos on a Gideon Falls page. And that's typically what I see when I read Endless Nation stuff. I'm not expecting comprehension on it. And if I was like talking to somebody about this book who might feel apprehensive about it, I would give that advice to just be like, I don't know. There was an answer there, like Matt gave it, and now it's like enhanced. But I think it's pretty cool knowing in here that you can get the vibe of it pretty easily, and that the Endless Nation, it's not just about the tech and background and all these high concept things that you're learning about the religion essentially, but that you see things like, this is Bodaway, right? Is that the guy you were talking about? Okay.
Yep.
So that Bodaway saying the phrase, either you all choose mercy or the nation shows you just how long all our memories are. And I think that is so cool to see them. You're just learning more about them as like, oh no, they weren't always like this. This is kind of the same origin that they came from, of being the down and out. And that's, I think, the first time we've directly learned that they weren't always like this, even though we could have implied it. But
and even tying it to like the blankets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The blankets of affliction.
Yeah.
I echo your point, Nathan. Like I feel the same way reading a lot of that is just kind of getting the gist of it, there's some cool beats out of it, but it's not necessarily what I dig the most out of this. And I certainly appreciate that other people get a lot out of it. But sometimes it just, sometimes I'm just reading the comic to have fun and not to, stay on one particular issue and try to figure out what everything means. So I'll keep going. And, I got you guys for that, but I enjoy the father and son, all that stuff going on. And I enjoy Texas Ranger going all John Wick on everybody. You know, that's the stuff that I'm having a lot of fun with. And you know, I rely on Mike and Andrew and stuff like that to give me a lot more meaning to the other issue.
I am curious what everyone like. Do people feel like they have a favorite portion of this story? While reading this volume, I thought like I'm very smitten with how each of these sort of different portions of the US has such a visual aesthetic and a culture to it, and that is remained consistent seemingly throughout this. And I would say the Endless Nation is probably one of my two favorite threads of this story to be following. I'm curious what other people's like favorite things are in this.
I like the Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
I gravitate towards the Ranger and Death and Mao and Babylon, and even the Horseman I do find pretty fascinating and kind of falls off a bit more there.
Yeah. So going back to like what we thought of it in general, honestly, this was my least favorite volume. I felt that there wasn't a lot that progressed the story. Like it was if you looked at each volume and kind of looked for what's the big epic driving force of this volume, what's the big thing that happens. So like in the first one, it's the overthrow of Mao, and in the second, I'm forgetting what's happening, what big events were in each one.
But I totally agree. Yeah,
this one didn't have that. It was more like the issue that's kind of nestled in the middle of all those, just to go, okay, so let's check back in with Death and see what he's doing, even though he doesn't really feature in this volume.
His girl, like,
right?
You know, they
or
just reiterated.
Let's check in with the Horsemen. They're still moving towards something, but we don't know what that really is yet. And just every story and every issue in this felt like one of those.
What about
does that
New
leave
Orleans?
So, and even like New Orleans, yeah, when I was flicking through it, to kind of, this is what I thought like 3 weeks ago when I got it and read it. And then I was flicking through it just before we started here to see, okay, was that a correct assessment? And there is a lot more of the Texas Ranger. And that's a progression there in terms of his storyline.
The resurrection of Ra's al Ranger.
Right. But then the fact that I don't particularly trust that the prince is actually dead.
I agree.
We're not seeing a body, and
comics
see a body, they're not really dead yet.
Even when you do.
Right. So I kind of got to the end of this reading it the first time, just feeling like, okay, so a bunch of stuff happened, but nothing's really changed or progressed very much.
Does that make you concerned that with only 2 volumes left, it's gonna kind of Game of Thrones final season rushed pacing to get it all done?
I think what it means is that, you know, the kind of pacing that I'm describing in like a volume where you have, say, 2 issues that establish, you know, the general story and tone of the volume, and then a little thing to divert and kind of allow you to catch your breath, and then a big conclusion in the last 2 issues. This is essentially that breath before we go full pelt into the last 2 volumes.
And that's exactly how I feel. Like to me, this felt like almost like the staging ground, or like it was setting up the chessboard to move into the final act, because I think
exactly.
Yeah, I agree with everything you
and
just said.
Reinforcing things you already knew.
Right, which means that, you know, it just means that it sits awkwardly as a standalone volume.
Transitional in nature, I think.
It's very transitional. So, you know, it needs to be there, and all of the events, you know, there are interesting moments and events in there. But as a total volume, it's a great series. Saying that it's my least favorite volume is not saying it's trash, but
still good ice cream. Ice cream is always good. So like, how about just the first issue of this, where Death realizing, you know, what, like the realization that Babylon doesn't see the world the way that it is.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked, I you know, pacing with Hickman can go a couple different ways, but I liked the pacing of that, in that we didn't belabor that for several issues. It's just that Death is confident and coherent enough to realize that something is not right with this kid. And I really liked the conversation that he had with Balloon in the middle of the night, and the threatening nature of that.
I thought that was awesome.
And we had, I think, a good Dragotta face too.
Yeah. Like the transition from just like, we're gonna fish and just patience is the way to do this, and then help. Why'd you say help? Because I can't carry all these fish by myself. And like his expression of like, this is not right.
Yeah, and
then the thing with the skull that Babylon thinks is a teddy bear.
And like, yeah, that 9-panel grid where it's the fishing all from, the first 7 panels of it at least are from the same perspective. You don't get that comic timing in this series a lot. You don't
agree.
The beat panels and the comedy zap effects coming over the boulder. It's
Well, it's interesting because if you have a kid that is super powerful and doesn't have the life experience, they're super dangerous, right? So Death has to be able to identify that this kid doesn't know the rules, and he's thinking in a way almost like when you play poker with somebody who doesn't know how to play poker. There's no way to beat them because they're totally unpredictable, and so are little kids.
Dude, that's so good.
They'll try stuff you never even thought of. So to have him kill that many fish just kind of casually going fishing, I thought that was pretty cool, and I'm excited to see him in battle.
It was a nice moment of levity, but I almost feel like that's kind of a story beat sometimes, that it precedes something horribly tragic that happens after that. Like if you're watching a movie or a TV show, when they finally get that father-son bonding moment, always means somebody's going to die.
Yeah, I would argue like maybe it's not someone dying, but it is somewhat tragic. Like, finding out that like, hey, this is your kid and he's not okay.
Yeah,
that's true. That's a good point.
So
and that he is happy, and that you need to break it to him at some point.
Yeah,
that's the tragedy there, is that this is a happy kid, and that's the dilemma. Do you let him be happy, or do you risk that happiness to let him know the truth?
So do we think that Balloon is showing him nicer things now?
Oh, that I've been pretty confident of that.
Is he doing him favors with that?
Well, except he's doing the kind of inversion where everything that is horrible looks nice. Because you see that. I quite like the sequence with. Now I had to ask my wife to remind me, my historian wife, that this is Mesa Verde, I believe, that they end up going to. With the skulls. Which is one of the few standing permanent structures that exist from pre-colonial America.
Is it Yuraka Mesa? Is that something like that?
It's something like that.
There's like an Indian tribe that just appeared in the middle of the night.
Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend.
Anasazi or something.
Yeah, like I liked, when we were talking about, how you tie the Endless Nation properly to, native history and stuff. I felt like having that still be a sort of existing abandoned structure was a good way of tying that to our world. But in terms of that perspective change, where he's seeing it as this playland and stuff, what I like is the full page teddy bear from his perspective, and the tension that has, because it's on a page turn. You don't know what it is until you turn the page. You're like, oh, what's it gonna be?
It's super not just a teddy bear.
I think like it being a skull was us getting off lightly.
Yeah. I was like, oh, it's just a skull. I was expecting something way worse.
It's just a skull. Things you say reading East of West.
There's lots of skulls.
I thought, like, I realized in this volume that the character arc and trajectory of the character of Death has put us seamlessly in a spot where I just didn't predict him to go. If we think about like issue number 1 of him, like the downward shot upward from the barrel of him, like shooting somebody in the heads and shadows, and the eyes are huge, and he's this like, he's Death. To where we're at now, I did like that, I like having it be that different. And then we had this one page of like, well, Dad's got to go off and show you how badass he is. So I'm sure we'll kind of go back to that. But there is this, yeah, it's either an incredibly complex character or it's a character who's sort of maybe had its destination shifted or neither. Maybe it was always meant to be that way. But it was not my prediction for the character of Death in Volume 8 to have this like pretty cute fishing scene.
I got a question for you then, Jeffrey.
Go.
I am sensing maybe that it's like, and maybe in myself too, that it was a little bit of a surprise where he ended up, which maybe is a knock to the like he hasn't been quite written to where he is now. He just kind of ended up there. Like, do you feel like we properly ended up there, or he was just put there?
I think that like we've had enough seeds, especially like with his willingness and ability to have a relationship with Xiaolin and to have had a child he wants to go like rescue. We've had seeds that prove that he has a large degree of humanity in him. So I don't think it was totally without warrant. It was just not my prediction. So I don't necessarily view it as a shortcoming. If anything of a shortcoming, it maybe makes me wonder, has the initial direction for this character changed from what he originally thought in issue 1? But then given that we had this quote of dialogue in it in volume 8 from, the end of issue 1, like also dude sticks to a plan, I think so.
I think just having him connect with his kid is that's going to go a long way to getting him where he is now. Because that was kind of his mission from the start, right? Like it didn't take long for us to realize that he wanted to go find his kid.
That's true.
And I'm nervous about what's going to happen in the next 2 volumes when like if he's 2 days away from Xiaolin, what's going to happen? How are they never going to see each other again? Or does he never see her? Does she never see him? Do they never see each other?
What was it?
My
they would never
eyes
lay
will
eyes.
never be lied. Yeah, they will never lay eyes on each other again.
Right.
Dude, Django, I like what you say that the catalyst would be all the time with his son. And I like to think that Death is in the same place that Jeff just was, where like he didn't think this is what he was going to end up because that's how powerful the relationship with his kid was. And maybe that's why it's a little jarring for us.
Did you guys enjoy the part where we got to see some more of the rabble? Very briefly.
Just the him marching on the big snake thing guy?
Yeah, just like going up the steps and actually talking about the fact that there are little people in the world. I was glad to see that. And then right after that, I was super stoked to see the completely destroyed Oval Office with
I didn't realize that's where they were, but that makes total sense.
Yeah. I liked that shot. Also, why do the horsemen leave the hologram up after they find the bartender? Like, why did they leave that up for the next guy to hang out with?
Wasn't it up when they came in?
Yeah, but why not turn it off?
You're implying that they would need to turn it off for some reason, though. Like why? Like they're just
they're
like
the apocalypse.
Doesn't matter, right?
All right.
I liked the line that they had with Sheriff of Babylon guy, like that idea of just like that person's got murder in their eyes. Like if anything, maybe we should just wish him luck. Like
there's sort of closest we got
Good luck
to them
with your murders.
Yeah. I felt like that was them being getting a bit more of a glimpse of them being the kind of embodiments of the concepts that they are, and that they're purely in it for perpetuating war and conquest and all these things, and that they don't care who does it,
right?
That was an interesting first glimpse at that kind of
so we lost the last little bit of you,
Mike, got muted there a little bit at the end.
Oh yeah, just I liked seeing that perspective for the first time.
I think twice, maybe 3 times now, we've seen, maybe I'm just missing something, a zoom in on Death's gun while he's been there, but nothing, like it's just been a panel with words on it. I think once in the last volume, once in this one. Am I just missing like a beat, a thing we do?
I didn't notice that. Outside of maybe just like a gun focus in a Western book was probably how I registered it.
Yeah, I guess maybe that would be it, if anything, because I went back and forth a couple times to see if it was going to progress back and forth to anything. But to me, it was the thing that you see right before they're just reminding you that someone has a gun because someone else is going to come grab it or they're about to use it, and neither of those things happened.
The Chekhov's
gun
rifle
wasn't
principle
involved at all. What, Mike?
The Chekhov's rifle principle.
Sure.
Chekhov's holstered gun.
Yeah. Death revolver.
But yeah, I was going to mention as well that this, that 3-page scene with Death and his son, that was a thing that felt clunky to me as well, considering how the previous issue had ended with, or maybe not the previous issue, but the last time we saw them ended with him, Death, getting this vision and going like, oh, I need to go and rescue Shaolin, and it's time for you to see what your old man is made of. And then they end on that beat, and then you come back to him like on the way there, and they're ending on him going, for the first time ever, someone made me not want to be a monster, and now I get to do something for her, bring you home. How's that sound, kiddo? And he's, I can't wait.
Yeah.
But it's like, but you've already decided you're going there. Why are we having another scene of you saying, and we're going to go to her?
Well, the purpose of this one was clearly to show, and which I love the relationship side of how he describes Xiaolin. Like that was just good writing as far as I'm concerned. But it does make me think like, why could that not have fit in the conversation last time? Because both conversations essentially ended with, now let's go do it.
Yeah. And I just felt it added to that feeling that I had of like, this was a volume that didn't really go anywhere because they kept repeating the same points.
Yeah.
Well, the big place that it went was in the first issue, right?
Yeah.
Like the Endless Nation took over the White Tower. That seemed like the big thing to me.
And the march towards him sort of saying that these are the 3 final days of the prophet or something. Like it was a big thing, but it was also like a transitional element of like, this is a necessary thing that had to happen ultimately towards whatever Wolf's ultimate fate is, which we now know is close to coming, but it made a lot of what I think are going to be upcoming scenes make a lot of sense. And this also was a 4-issue volume as opposed to all the others being 5 issues. So there is some element of, I think that like, I was thinking about that while reading this, like, did he pace this volume knowing that this is going to be a 4-issue or something because we're ending at 45 issues and it's not going to fit into 6-issue or 5-issue trades or whatever? Like I was particularly curious about his brain going into that, but it only, I think, strengthens sort of what Mike is saying, which is that there wasn't a thing in this that felt different than the other volumes.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for a way to see if like they could have ended the previous volume on issue 35 and then started like the penultimate volume on 36 or something. It would have meant for like a weird like 6-issue and then 7-issue volume. But
I mean, sometimes you need some connective tissue.
Yeah, and sometimes
your books come out forever apart.
Has anybody, I think I thought about while doing this, and Andrew, or has anybody consulted our timeline? Like the one from the source?
In the world?
Yeah, in the world from volumes and volumes ago. Like I realized like, I wish that I could go, I can, but I need to make the time to go and look at that timeline and see what elements of it make sense that didn't make sense when I looked at it initially.
Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't revisited the source at all since.
I want to.
Yeah. Did anybody else get a real Liefeld vibe from this page with all the pouches on the back?
Yes.
I do now.
I also like the one of the panels of the activist person who's yelling at Wolf, like, this isn't how it's supposed to be, made me think of some of the silencer art.
Oh, with
Ramita was doing the art.
Yeah.
Yeah, the backpack and stuff. Hey,
I was like, from behind, she looks like Silencer.
In the middle of this volume, Wolf said something that got me really worried that he was going to die. Well, I mean, I guess he kind of even says the final days of the prophet, but even before he says that, there's a dialogue line where I was like, oh no, that's one of those things that we get right before several pages later they die. And I'm curious, you came to my mind, just like, how is Wynn going to sustain another wolf death after like the first one? I know that you didn't love that.
So many times. Like, I'm just, it's like when you ingest as much media as I do, like that's the thing that happens. I get attached to characters and then they die. So like if he does end up dying in the next volume, which was what it sounds like, I mean, unless he's gonna somehow like vomit up the word, which I wouldn't put past Hickman for like him to somehow be deprofited. But for what it's worth, you know, I'll be okay.
So that made me think that at one moment in this, it was the first, when he was saying I can feel the word inside me and it's itching, I felt like that was the first time that we got an indication that the consumption of the word was actually, and he was saying that he could hear Orion's voice in his head. It was the first time it felt to me like there seemed to be a connection that the consumption of the word actually was having some sort of a byproduct and not just filling somebody with a sense of confidence or like, you know, that
like
their word is the word.
Or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm curious what people thought about that, or what I just liked getting a little bit more of that.
I mean, he ate the dude whose name I can't remember, who was Ezra, who was being puppeted by the beast, right? So maybe he's got some of that monster in him. Maybe, you know, maybe it's the word, maybe it's physically something itching inside of him. Yeah.
Oh yeah, alien style. That's great.
Alien.
That would fit in this book quite well to see something just like rip out of his chest, of course.
Yeah.
All right. So earlier you said, what do you like about this book, or what things stand out as some of your favorite stuff? And we were talking mostly about the different nations and stuff. One of the things that always stands out to me is the scenes where we get amazing contrasting colors, like blue and orange stuff. And maybe that's just Frank Martin we're talking about.
Oh yeah, and like the like letter panel at the bottom of that page too, where it's just saying boo.
Yep. Yeah. I think it stands out a ton. I look forward to it every time I see it. When this volume started off with that, I think maybe that's what started me off on a good foot for it, because then when I heard Mike talk about nothing happened, and I was like looking through the book for refuting evidence, and I was like, yeah, nothing happened.
All these colors happened.
These colors happened, and I think I just started off on a good foot with it.
Yeah.
That really is a thing that stands out to me a whole lot, is that really super rad contrast. Like I think I remember colors a lot. Like I consistently go back to is Dean White the Uncanny X-Force Remender one? Just all those pinks and stuff, like they just look rad. And then, okay, Django, I want to go back to what you were saying, because I don't want to dismiss they left up the hologram thing, because I want to just like write you off as like, this isn't criminal. Like people don't just automatically do the same thing when they leave a crime scene or something.
Yeah, Alan Moore writing the pen.
I will totally chalk it up to like the hubris of the Horsemen.
But we can talk about this in terms of what did that lead to, them leaving it up? It led to John Freeman's supposed death. So if we're actually talking about like main east of west plot line here, what was the eventuality? Was the eventuality a good or a bad thing for the Horsemen? And if we say that they left it up for a reason, let's say you picked up on something that we didn't pick up, and they are actually okay with the Chosen dying, what does that mean for us? Or the Horsemen, or the Apocalypse?
Do we have any evidence that they care about the Chosen?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask Mike, or anyone who's got a good brain. What do we remember the relationship between, you know, and not marijuana smoke addled brain? Do we remember, like, what is the relationship between the Horsemen and the Chosen?
I mean, they're facilitators. I don't know what their relationship is, but at least they're on the same side of A and B.
Okay, so they
very initially, I felt like there were lots of scenes that conveyed that the Chosen were believers, or mostly believers, and they saw the Horsemen as, you know, part of the word and the message, and that they were important and also very powerful. I only generally saw contempt from the horsemen towards the chosen because they're meat.
Didn't wasn't the horsemen, weren't they systematically going through politicians to get to the president? Because Death killed the original president, and then the horsemen went through and until they found somebody who was a believer in the message.
Okay, so where does that take you then, Will? Like, does that match up with?
I mean, I think that goes back to what you guys said earlier, which is really they're agents of chaos. They're embodiments of their name, so they're just there to keep the pieces moving to a degree. Maybe, I mean, that's my takeaway, is that they're helping facilitate the apocalypse, so they need to keep pieces in place to facilitate making it happen.
Like nothing good can happen if we leave this hologram on, so let's leave this hologram on.
Yeah, a lot of the vibe I get from them sometimes is of teenagers playing a game that allows them to be more violent than they should. They don't consider any people to be actual people. They're completely unconstrained by morality. And they just kind of do whatever seems fun at the time.
Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
It's what your words made me think of.
Yeah, but then,
because they know they can't go to adult jail, and there's just that difference in like
right, and
they have no accountability.
Yeah, and they know that it's all a game. They know that they're there for a specific purpose. They know there's an end objective in mind. So who cares what happens to the meat along the way? They're just obstacles at best.
Mike, that makes me love that they're teenagers so much more. Like, who among us cannot remember
that's deliberate.
Doing the dumbest stuff ever? Because, like, I don't know, cops would be disappointed in us as long as it wasn't like you're actually hurting someone. Like, that's, man.
As long as we were white.
Yeah, that's true.
Seriously,
that's true.
I mean, there's a lot more to that. That's
blue or red or yellow in this case.
Yeah. Man, that I love that you just picked up on that. I feel like that subtle tone was there to show that they were just a little bit haphazard, maybe
removed, or
removed is a great word too. Yeah, but I like where you went with that.
Going back to like what our favorite parts, I think what really stood out for me in this volume was realizing how much I like Bodaway. That line, the perhaps we should round all you up, warriors or not, and march you north in blankets of affliction. That line, and then his conversation with Wolf, both earlier and then later in the volume, it was just so well written. I love how strong he is, but also how like relaxed and willing to compromise and willing to admit fault.
Do you think his voice can compete with Archibald Chamberlain's and how strong his written voice is?
I don't think so, because Archibald's pretty forceful. He's got more of like he takes a step back, and Archibald, I don't feel like he would admit that he was wrong ever.
Archibald is like how Hickman talks to himself in the shower or something.
I think maybe one of my complaints definitely was that there wasn't enough Archibald in this volume.
100%.
I mean, he is, a little bit like we do get like a couple moments of like, we get to see behind his mask of conniving, and like you can tell he like actually cares that his niece has been shot.
Mm-hmm. And his line of, "We've been around each other for the better part of a decade. Do you still not know me?" Like, I really liked that line of like, it's still embodied like some of his humanity and ability to connect and understand people, and to be like, do you really not know me? Like, I liked that line.
Yeah, they implied that connection between him and Belle, like back in volume 1.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that he seems to be kind of blundering ahead, assuming that he's going to be able to weasel out of the end of the world.
Bodo or Chamberlain, sorry,
Archibald.
Yeah.
Like, he's doesn't see like Wolf seems like he's making peace with the fact that the chosen aren't going to make it. Mm-hmm. And Archie's just like, I'll get out of this. I get out of everything.
What do you think his aspiration is?
Just at the very least, because you could look at it that he's a gambler. He's figured out the odds, and basically it's either he doesn't scheme and connive, and the world comes to an end and he dies, or he does, and either he succeeds and he survives, or he doesn't, and the same thing happens. There's nothing for him to lose in conniving and trying to avoid the end of the world. There's literally no other option.
His long game can just be a little shorter.
Bell says all of this so you could be president. He's like, you've known me for 10 years. You think this is all about being president? You think that's what my long game is? Do you think his long game is survival through the apocalypse, or do you think it's elevation to some type of role? That was a question I had when he said it.
I definitely think so.
Yeah, I think he's probably connected the two in his mind, that the way to survive is to take over the world. It's
if he can connive his way and be one of the chosen and flip himself to be on top of whatever happens, whatever the apocalypse is, he can make it so he's on top after it. That is surviving, but if he can also make sure that no one else can challenge him because he was a part of it, that would only put him in a more beneficial position. And,
what is that desirable position post, like right now where it's not much further than like Pinky in the Brain? Like, we don't know what taking over the world is, if that's his goal. Do we have any idea what that most desirable position would be?
What world is there going to be to take over?
I don't know, but you guys have just got me interested in, like, he's clearly been maybe the most successful person, if we just use that general term so far. So what is he actually being successful at?
I was just going to say, I feel like he is just trying to turn, whether or not he thinks he can actually stop it. I feel like no matter what, he's just trying to turn whatever situation happens so that he's always on top. He's just constantly maneuvering because all he wants is power and just control. That's all I get from him. He's just a super narcissist.
I mean, if he makes it through this, he's going to start his own college.
He could, if he would.
Start a university.
If he would shave and get a new outfit, he could replace Death.
Yes. He's got a gun for it, so.
He's tall, angular. He's got a gun. I don't know if he's got a kid, but
I don't think that Babylon would call him daddy.
Who else hasn't said what their favorite stuff is? I'm really curious at that.
For me, like my favorite sequence scene out of this was Domo and her girlfriend being U-Haul lesbians.
And I loved Domo's hair. It's like,
yeah, she's got rat tail.
How quick does the mullet rat tail grow out? Because it looks like she's a Padawan in the Jedi Temple or something.
Yeah, like she's gonna get murdered by Anakin Skywalker here. In
she meditated it to be that long. That's what Widowmakering is.
I really like that they were essentially retired, right?
Yeah, they're very we have all this money and sure, go buy yourself one of everything in the hat and go kill these people. We don't care.
But she's
the ultimate lesbian fantasy, living in a caravan in the middle of the woods filled with gold.
What did you refer to them as? When U-Haul lesbians? Is
U-Haul lesbians? You haven't heard this joke?
No.
It's like a joke of what does a lesbian bring to a second date? A U-Haul.
Oh my god!
Because they're moving in together.
Oh, okay. I don't get things.
I just like that Doma is arguably one of the scariest manipulators and biggest badasses in this world, and she's like, nah, I'm done.
And I satisfied?
This was my second favorite scene of the book. Definitely right after that other one, because of that line Django just mentioned. You just sit back and watch them eat each other. Like her reasoning for just wanting to leave the game. Like, yeah, I'm good at it, but fuck that. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'm out.
Yeah, I thought I mattered.
That scene. Yeah, I think I like that scene for seeing all of these kind of tertiary characters. They're not chosen. They're not agents of the apocalypse or anything. They're people who've kind of got caught in the crossfire, kind of running into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the respecting each other straight off the bat, as because all we've ever really seen from the Texas Ranger guy is just contempt for everybody who's in his way.
Yeah.
But he makes a really good connection with the two of them just because, they've been screwed over as well.
I was also shocked that like the following sequence was him going to New Orleans, and he's like, I'm hunting Chosen. And they're like, oh, well, by all means, come with us. And that was just another instance of like, you meet no resistance when you're being genuinely yourself. Like when you find your true harmony, you resonate. And that was just like, I'm just fucking killing Chosen. And everyone's like, oh, well, by all means, come, let me give you some money.
Kill this guy who makes our lives a living pain.
Yeah.
So
it's even better. It's the turning up and saying, I'm here to kill the crown prince, and the brother going, oh, really?
I'm in. I have a question about this scene where they're talking about the children of the king.
Oh, the like, is my blood really this thin?
I liked that line so much.
Yeah. But at the very beginning, he says, tell me how many sons do I have? And she says, after the red fever took John the 7th last year, you have 14, my king. And then at the bottom of that same page, she says, some might argue that there are 3 who are worthy if one was to overlook your 7th son's current infatuation with cruelty. So does that mean that he named his first son John, and then the next one was John the First?
You're exactly right. No.
Is John number 0?
I thought that just 7th died, so 8th replaced 7th.
Yeah, I thought it was like
they changed names.
They take
their names are like the order.
That was my understanding.
Okay.
Was like, if the son ahead of you in line dies, or you murder him, or just something happens, you move up a number.
That is a database nightmare.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, but that fits in for like how I don't know, heartless the situation actually is.
Well, and how when he says, all right, everybody get out, but John, you stay. Like he tells just one of the Johns to stay by just calling him John.
Do we think that John is the oldest John? Because he's the one that would inherit the throne. Is it by age, or is it by warrant?
Our John is not, though. Is that the one he asked to stay? I don't remember.
Yeah. And I thought that he was...
Our John is not the first oldest.
He's not the oldest?
I don't think so.
I thought that the brother who's shot off was the oldest.
So so our Chosen is for sure the oldest one available.
Because the one who got his leg shot off was trying to take down the crown prince so that he'd bump up.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, because he's number 4, I think.
Okay. All right. That's very confusing numbering.
I had the same thing, which was to say that like the 7th has died, and then to refer to another one as the 7th seemed confusing. And I just had to make an assumption that they're just if maybe it was 18 and we've just been shrinking it down.
Yeah.
Django, I think you froze because I can't hear you, but maybe I'm an asshole and the only one that can. Okay.
No,
but you look adorable all the time.
I don't think his mic is working or something.
He's been having some internet connections. That angry face that he's making right now is very, very good.
Seen it before?
I very much hope that I can say I have nothing to do with the internet issues.
Can I ask a question on the group? Because
Please.
Where we got 2 volumes left. I felt like this has worn like a lot of its Game of Thrones influence on its shoulders in the last couple of there's lots and lots of moving pieces. Everybody's kind of angling for the top spot, or everybody's got an agenda, so there's a lot of moving puzzle pieces. I have no idea where this is going, and I don't feel like I could predict it, but I'm curious if you guys have any predictions on how the next 2 volumes or how this is going to end before we get there.
I mean, I don't think this is where it's headed, but it would be pretty cool if this volume was pretty much the people who end up thwarting the apocalypse. I think that would be a pretty cool result, and would make this volume make more sense in like pacing terms.
So like Wolf and the Ranger sort of.
Yeah, but also like I wouldn't put it past Hickman for the last page of the last issue to be everything ends and then white page.
The last volume was really heavy on all the other characters, Archibald and all those. So we barely saw any of Death and Babylon, and very little of Texas Ranger Wick. So it was very heavy on these guys now. So I imagine that there's a lot of pieces to put into those last two volumes. But like, I don't know if I have any sort of firm grasp of prediction of, at least in like Game of Thrones, like they're trying to rule the one single kingdom. So is it one person that's trying to, come out on top after the apocalypse? Or, what's the end game? What's the goal, the end of the story that they're all, shooting for besides just the apocalypse? Is it who's going to survive? Who's going to be on top? What is it?
That's a good question. I think that there's no way that 2 volumes before the end, Hickman's done killing people. Like they've got to keep taking people out, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got everybody but one, and then the horseman had to regenerate again or something.
I don't know if it's a cop-out, but I think my favorite thing about Hickman's writing is that I like his brain enough at this point through reading his works. Maybe we're all egotists in some regard, but like for me, a lot of books I feel like I can predict, or I will put effort into predicting an ending. And Hickman and Morrison are 2 writers that I love that I actually don't really put any effort into predicting, outside of the just like very effortless, like, oh, I wonder if blank will happen. But I don't really try to figure it out, mostly because I don't generally predict their work, but I also like it's of a type of brain. Like I think that's one of the things that draws me to their work is it resolves and goes in a direction that I don't necessarily intuit myself. So I actually haven't put that much effort into thinking about it because I have no fucking idea.
I think they also both of those guys keep you busy with the story and the pacing and trying to figure out what's going on at any given moment. So you don't even really have time to kind of wonder, like it's hard to see the bones or the structure of most Hickman and Grant Morrison stories. Like those guys kind of disguise that pretty well, and you're just sort of along for the ride. Kind of like a roller coaster where you're not sure if you're going to turn left or right in the dark.
One thing,
well, but I think that's what's special about what they do, because that's really fun when you don't know if you're going to get A or B. And the fun is, I remember first experiencing this watching 24 back in the day. The fun was, is it A or is it B? And I'm constantly being told which one it is, but you never know where it's going to end up. And it somehow is always not the one you thought it was going to be at the very last second. Yeah. There is no A and B here. It's H and Q and ampersand. And yeah. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be choosing between. And I think that's really fun. And
I think he obfuscates things that are important in a way, like very intentionally throughout his other works that, like for me throughout this whole run, I keep thinking that somehow the role of technology and whatever happened in that flashback in issue 1 about like a meteor happened, like I keep thinking that like somehow a twist is going to happen with technology and how the Endless Nation encountered that and the cultural divide that happened with, like that seems like an unexplored truth that will be important to me. But that to me is very Hickman, which is like he doesn't explain some things fully and you kind of make up a truth about it, but then somehow one of those things actually has a primary fundamental truth that then pays off or something.
We would have to see more about the technology soon if that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I could be totally wrong.
He's not I mean, we've got 7 issues left, so we would need to see it pretty quick if it's going to come up, and I think that would be awesome. But I do like knowing that at least he's not he was dead the whole time type of writer. So it's not just going to be 6 issues later, and then the 7th issue is like, technology did a thing, and we're going to start getting in the next 4 or 5 issues, I think we'll start getting this answer. Like this conversation right now is supposed to be, I think, according to Hickman, who knows? You're not even supposed to know how to found your entire conversation. And then I think after the next 4, which is the next volume, we'll have this conversation with probably all the pieces. And then we go into the next volume trying to figure out kind of who was right.
Yeah, I think is interesting about what it's building up towards. Basically, everything that is being building up towards is on a national level. It's the nations, interacting with each other and at war with each other. And we keep checking back in on the horsemen, teasing us with this, oh, but they have a plan. They have like a ritual that they're working towards, or some sort of, project in mind that involves the beast and involves reuniting with death or something like that. But we're no closer to finding out what that is than we were back in issue 1. So I feel like what's building towards will be that, and I started thinking this when we were talking about what's Chamberlain's ultimate objective. And ultimately, what if the apocalypse is just going to happen because of the wars between all of the nations? Then the way to survive is to be the last nation standing.
And then you survive the apocalypse. Because what if the
so
horsemen are purely
survive?
Symbolic?
Which nation is going to survive on top?
See,
Archibald.
That's the thing. That
does
then
it
gives
matter?
you the way of
it does matter to me. I wanted to know.
That then gives you the way of averting the apocalypse, which is peace, which is to stop the warring. And I think, what we can definitely build towards is, what we have is this kind of feeling of crushing and inevitability of, the apocalypse happening, and these prophecies that say that this is going to happen, mixed in with sort of political inevitability, that nations will always war with each other, that people cannot control larger events than them. We see a lot of that in this volume with like the resistance fighters who end up executed even though they won. But what if the conclusion and the twist that we'll get at the end is no, none of these things are inevitable. Apocalypse isn't inevitable. The message is as good as the paper it's written on, which is being consumed 2 times. And ultimately the nations are composed of people and they can choose their destiny. I don't know.
I'm with you. Like I think that's totally it. And I loved your statement about the as good as the paper it's written on, which has been consumed twice. But yeah, I think that is kind of part of the structure, which is that like the message is inherently metaphorical in nature to me, it seems. And when that's the case, it can mean many things. And so the message can be true and kind of represent just this crazy chaotic political upheaval of like, it's chaos. There isn't a thing that's supposed to happen, but that is what's supposed to happen because it's sort of the metaphorical equivalent of how everything happens all the time. I feel like it is working towards a place of peace, which is, or like rebirth or restarting or something, like the apocalypse not necessarily being the end of everything, but actually, the head of the snake that's eating its tail.
Which is a tradition in pretty much every apocalypse story that's being created by any culture. There's always something after.
Right. Or else it would be a real bummer of a story.
The apocalypse is the rebirth.
It totally is. Like even looking at the definition of apocalypse, like I don't know if this will show up, but you've got number 1, which is basically just like the Bible. But number 2 is actually how we use apocalypse. It's an event involving destruction on a catastrophic scale. And I think what makes me curious about it is that we are clearly a little bit in between, or we're at least supposed to think that both of those definitions are somewhat possible because of all the biblical references in this.
Well, and we don't have a reluctant leader after
Django's Luke Skywalker,
right? Well, like if everybody but one person died and we ended up with one person who had to rule the world, who would be the one that would like it the least? Because that's kind of who I would suspect.
Shaolin?
What's that?
Shaolin, maybe?
Or Death?
I mean,
or Wolf doesn't seem like they would love it.
Yeah.
Like Death and Shaolin without their son, and neither one of them have eyes.
Man, and where are his eyes? Like, where are? Yeah, he's just got little plugs. I keep just waiting to see what's behind that kid's eye. We haven't talked about the fact that like we saw dead homeboy from the bar like 2 times in this volume, and we saw him living. Like, I love he's just this recurring staple, like, well, he probably deserved it. Like, I love that we saw almost the same shot of like, he's dead and that eye thing is open. Like, that was
It's going to be like Lost, where the last scene or the last shot of the whole thing is that guy. One more time.
This will feed perfectly into your Lost.
It was his
podcast.
nightmare the whole time.
Okay, Django sent me a message.
Coming up with an even better joke.
Oh, that was a cute moment.
It was
Django
so
sent me
good.
a message here of trade paperbacks that we have in stock that might be good following, like, things that we would be able to stock people quickly and not need to rely on a restock for our subsequent book club book, next week's book. And I'm curious how people feel. My first thought was like, I actually have enjoyed continuing with Gideon Falls, but we have a variety of like other volume number ones. The first one that came up alphabetically was American Carnage. And I was like, holy shit, I would love to read American Carnage with everybody, because that I think would be very good for the times as well. But any thoughts, anyone?
My first thought is I've never read Saga, and I've always been told to, so that would be a long, fun one that we could do post East of West, maybe.
I think maybe post East of West. Nathan sent a really wise text today of just sort of in terms of scheduling and things. I think maybe post East of West we might switch to like an every other week type of thing.
I think it would do this group and this quarantine book club justice to end it with East of West number 10, and then be able to continue on another night or something, and be able to call that kind of like season 1 or whatever. That like we did it and accomplished it, and then people can feel even better if they want to come in on a different night or change the frequency, or Jeff and Django
some other folks.
Yeah, and even make other people feel comfortable like starting with a new setup or something. I don't know.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I'm impressed that we've all stuck through 8 volumes of this. That blows me away. I thought we'd be down to like me and Jeff and one other person by now.
It is
we just
hugely
can't let you guys
joyful.
down.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Listen, I know that vibe too. I'm here.
I needed another reason to listen to Django's voice during the
Listen, how do you feel about editing podcasts? Because I have hours and hours of work. Hours and hours of work I would love to pass off to somebody.
Pay us in free comics.
Yeah. But
I'm happy I'm happy. I mean, I'm perfectly happy continuing Gideon Falls, where we only have one more full volume in our hands right now. So
I think volume 4 should be out a month from now, which is when we would be up to volume 4. But who knows?
The restock. That would be after East. We really only have, if we are saying the East of West volume 10, if that's a consideration as the last week, we would only have 2 more weeks to fill then, right?
That is true. Volume 3, East of West.
And then we obviously can still keep going, but
I was gonna throw out there like my knee-jerk one is like I'm always gonna stand the old guard, but there's only one volume of that in paperback right now,
and we don't have enough in stock, so we would have to.
Do we not?
So that's why I'm like, I'm always gonna be like, hey, read this Greg Rucka book. But I was wondering,
Leandro Fernandez art, that's gorgeous.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I was just looking at my bookshelf about like books that go on longer that have an ending, like maybe Descender. I don't know how anyone else feels about that, or if that's something that would work.
I just would love to do with something that's in stock and do like a lot of the fun of this thing has been being like, oh, this is also a comic place that we all know and love. Support of being like, let's move some inventory and read stuff that we've always wanted to read.
Absolutely.
And like, you're not explicitly asking us to do that. So we've been reading newer issues of East of West.
But like, I mean, in that case, it's got to be Fables Volume 6, which we ended up with like 40 copies of for no good reason. So
inventory
buckle up, everybody.
I would be encouraged to maybe, since we have next week, and then we'll have East of West Volume 9, and then another week in the East of West Volume 10, and then some restructuring of what we're doing. With those 2 vacant weeks, I feel tempted to maybe do either continue with Gideon Falls or do books that are singularly contained books. Mm-hmm. And the 2 that come to my mind, I got real excited a couple of days ago when my partner Sam was like, man, I've never read We 3. And I was like, that would be such a good book club book. I also don't know that we have enough stock for that. I would actually have to order that. Okay. That would be a good one for the future. We 3. But American Carnage, if no one's interested in that, it's a crime book that is very sort of like a racial politics book. But I think
who's the writer on that? I can't remember.
Brian Hill.
Right. Okay.
And Leandro Fernandez
did the art. So
Oh,
the
wow.
old guard.
I
artist.
mean, it's not the old guard, but I feel like
it's pretty good.
Was there
I'm
a
in
movie
favor.
American Carnage?
There was a movie
Well,
Old Guard that just came out.
Well, yeah.
I don't think there's
Why Wen can't shut up about it.
They're
thinking of
they're-
something
Not
else.
heard of Old Guard until this movie started.
Oh really? It's very
Last
good.
Days of American Crime. Is that what you're thinking of?
I think I was thinking,
That was
honestly,
just made.
embarrassingly, I think I was thinking of American Gangster. So we'll just move on from that.
Hey, everybody
But
loves
yeah,
Denzel.
American Carnage sounds good to me.
If
We've gotten this far on your guys' judgment, so like
I
we're in.
completely agree.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's do American Carnage, man.
It's well stocked. It's really good. It ended prematurely, and I think it's really good for the time that we're in right now because it was an uncomfortable read a year and a half ago as it was coming out. I think it will be an even more uncomfortable read right now, and I think that as a group of awesome white comic fans is a very good
This is our
people who are
place.
fans of comics. Like the more uncomfortable we can be, that would be
Yeah.
that would
Next,
be
we'll read Bitterroot.
I just ordered that. I'm excited.
if it would come back into print, that would be super good.
Oh, is it out of print right
it
now?
has-
Like,
It's we're just waiting for restock on the trades.
for a
okay,
long
but it'll
time.
be a while. I shouldn't. Okay.
It'll come back into print, but it's been
It's just
probably
the-
a month
yeah.
without them.
The whole process has been slowed down by the everything.
Yeah, by the
The other thing that I like about American Carnage is that once we're done with it, we're done.
yeah,
How many
but
issues?
it is
It's
like 8 or 9 issues.
8 or 9 issues, but
Yeah.
it's one volume.
Yeah, so
yeah.
cool.
It's not going to make me cry like Day Tripper did, though.
No,
Not
promises.
like thank you for being vulnerable with us, everybody, and just being like, oh, Django and Jeff want to read a thing called Day Tripper. They say will make us cry.
Is American Carnage a book that Nathan can make his wife read that's not going to depress her?
No, but someday we'll talk about the update of her
Definitely.
reading a couple more Day Tripper issues. And
I mean,
not happy about it.
if
Why
we're
do you
looking for a
do this to
happy
yourself?
book, I have
I
a
just
great
wanna-
hardcover.
After East of West 10, I just
Did
want to
Old
have
Guard?
yeah, I want to have a
I wish there was a
decompression
hardcover of
with
Old Guard.
everybody.
Yeah.
Sell me 10 copies of that.
Decompress.
Also,
Yeah.
people should read Old Guard. Okay,
Yes.
well,
But yeah,
any other final thoughts, everybody? I know.
I mean, I
talk a
kind
lot
of wanted
try
to
and guide things.
read Babylon's awful like joke that he makes, just in case anyone watching didn't actually read the volume.
Why don't you? Let's end on that note. Can we get a Win production of Babylon's terrible dad joke?
And do his voice. You're deciding what his voice is right now.
I will decide what Babylon sounds like. Who wants to be death? I vote Django.
All right.
Django, of course.
Obviously.
Want to hear a joke?
Sure.
What's the difference between a catfish and Conquest, the absolute worst horseman?
What?
One is a bottom-dwelling, scum-sucking scavenger, and the other is a fish.
How do I make that a ringtone? How do I make that a ringtone? Can Django, can you make that a ringtone for me?
I mean, you guys post this on YouTube, so I mean,
It can be done.
We'll figure it out. Thank you, seriously, all of you, for still being with us 8 volumes in. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on these volumes every time I'm reading it. I read that Endless Nation conversation 2 times today, separated by time, and I just thought, I cannot wait to hear everyone's thoughts on that and for Mike to tell me what happened. And I
all with you.
I love all of you for it. So thank you very, very much, and I look forward to seeing you all next Monday or when I deliver comics to you this week.
Thank you,
Yes.
friends.
keep
Thank
safe,
you.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Yeah.
And then
Take
Andrew,
care.
you and I and Django have to talk about something for a second.
Oh.